And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Friday, April 18th. We have a lot to cover on the show today, as we usually do. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys, as always, tip or donate, get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining. Between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers, we appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day. So any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss today. So we're going to start off the show. I did bring this up yesterday, I believe, but we didn't talk about Aaron Rodgers for a bit. Well, we're going to talk about him today because he did make an appearance on the Pat McAfee show and didn't really give us, a clear indication on if he's going to play or if he's going to retire. Both things are on the table, but we don't know where he's going to sign. He didn't tell us that. We'll get into what he talked about on the Pat McAfee show, mainly talking about his exit from the Jets and how that went down, the meeting with the new regime of the Jets. So we will get into that. We will talk about the playing games for tonight. That will finalize the rest of the playoff series as we move into the first round. And speaking of the first round and the NBA playoffs in general, in the third part of the show, we'll give predictions, how the playoffs are going to play out, who I have going to the finals, all of that good stuff when we come back, or in the third part of the show. And then in the fourth part of the show, we'll talk about Aaron Judge, the start that he's gotten off to this season, and can he keep this level of play up as he approaches his mid-30s and beyond that? We'll talk about that later in the show, and then we will conclude the show with our final NFL post-free agency rankings, or division rankings. We will cover the AFC West today. Now, actually, before we get into talking about Aaron Rodgers, I do want to bring this up. So, got the show today that will take us into the weekend. Next week is the draft. Now, Friday, which is the 25th, which is a week from today, that will be my last show ever on GSMC. This is something that is going to happen. There was discussions behind the scenes about it. Obviously, nothing, bad. Nothing, just it will be my last show. I know it's sad for some of you, but yeah, no, it's I've been doing this for almost a couple of years now, and it's been a lot of fun. The interactions with you guys has been great, and we're going to make the most of it for the the next week. Next week's going to be great. But yeah, it will be my last show, but that does not mean that I'm going to disappear into the darkness. You will still see me, doing other things on YouTube and, putting out podcasts. Just it will not be with GSMC. Again, nothing bad, nothing happened. They didn't say we're done with you. No, this was just we had conversations, and this is what's gonna happen. So don't be discouraged about it. But yeah, it's gonna be different because again, I've been doing this for a while now, and it's gone very fast. But yeah, so next Friday will be my last show hosting a GSMC podcast. So yeah, just wanted to bring that to light. All right, so now that we got that out of the way, now we talked about not going into the darkness. Well, let's talk about someone that has gone into the darkness, and that is Aaron Rodgers. So he was on the Pat McAfee show yesterday, and like I said, didn't give us, hey, I'm going to be playing here next year, like he did with the Jets, back in the day. That's weird to say back in the day because it did happen a couple of years ago. But he talked about everything still being on the table. Whether it's retirement or playing. He did bring up the fact that there's stuff going on in his inner circle that he has to pay attention to, focus all of his attention on, and that's kind of why maybe there's been a delay with him making a decision. Now I know some people will probably roll their eyes at that, but you know what? However you feel about Aaron Rodgers, and again, we don't know what's going on in his inner circle. He's a human being, okay? We deal with stuff. I've dealt with stuff in my life. I'm sure people watching this podcast have dealt with stuff in their life within their inner circle that, needs attention. And if that's the case, if that is what is delaying his decision, you know, that's fine with me. Because he's a human being, and if there's stuff going on in his life that he has to focus on, that's more important. That's more important. Your personal life, there's serious stuff going on. That's more important than, going to play football. Now, when it comes to the football talk, again, people are saying he's holding teams hostage. And look, here's the thing. I'm going to disagree with that because if the Steelers are a hostage, then they wouldn't be able to walk away. Now, you could say, well, the Steelers don't have a quarterback. They got Mason Rudolph, right? And they made the playoffs with Mason Rudolph. Now, he started the final 3 games to make the playoffs. So, and the Steelers are a roster that, you know what, they're not going to be a horrible team next year, even with Mason Rudolph starting. Like, they're going to win games. They'll find a way to win games. And, if they're a hostage, they wouldn't be able to walk away. They could walk away whenever they want. And they talked about waiting for Rodgers. They have no problem waiting. I mean, at some point they will walk away, but they have no problem waiting. When do you hear a hostage is willing to wait? So, no, I don't think he's holding them hostage. They could walk away whenever they want. The Vikings did it. The Giants, they pivoted. Now, they kind of left the Steelers with nothing right now, other than Mason Rudolph as the quarterback. So, yeah, I guess they will continue to wait. Now, Rodgers talked about, a lot of the reports that were out there that, he was, maybe waiting for the Vikings to maybe come back to him and say, hey, we want you. He said that wasn't true. He talked about how, when there were the reports out there that the Jets were begging for, or he was begging the Jets to let him play for them again. He said that wasn't true. He did say that, the coaches that he met with, he talked about Brian Dable. He spoke very highly of Brian Dable. Now, look, as a Rodgers fan, I would have liked to have seen him sign with the Giants just because it's my team. And, just to see him play 1 year for the Giants, I think, for me personally, I would enjoy that. I'm kind of in the minority with that, but I would enjoy that. But he did talk about his meeting with the Jets. And it's very interesting how the meeting went down. So, if you remember, Rodgers flew out there to meet with Muji and Aaron Glenn. Muji, the GM, Aaron Glenn. And, to discuss whether they want to bring him back or not. So, according to Rodgers, he flies out there, he meets with Aaron Glenn, and they're talking. Rodgers says he leaves the room, a little bit into the meeting, brings in the GM, brings in Muji, and then, Rodgers is talking to the Muji, and then Aaron Glenn goes, so do you want to play football? And Rodgers says, yeah, I'm interested. And Aaron Glenn supposedly said, well, not supposedly, but said, we're going in a different direction. And this supposedly happened, very very into the meeting. And Rodgers said that he was caught by surprise by it just because of how fast they were like, yeah, we're moving on. We're going in a different direction. Because he was expecting that he was going to come to the Jets, they were going to talk for a while, and then there would be some kind of resolution, a couple of hours in or something. Not a couple of minutes or, 20 minutes, whatever it was. So, and supposedly Aaron Glenn said that, he doesn't want, like, when he's addressing the team, he doesn't want Rodgers to undermine what he's saying. He doesn't want the team to look at Rodgers and be like, "What do you think of what he's saying?" Like Rodgers would have more power than Aaron Glenn. And Rodgers basically said, like, "Listen, I don't care about that." Like, and you know, you don't know me. That's what he said. And then Aaron Glenn said, "You don't know me." And Rodgers said, "Yeah, I don't." He said, "Yeah, I don't know you. That's why I flew all the way out here to meet with you guys and to see what your vision is for the team, and you know what I would bring to the table, how this relationship could work." But he said he was fine with them moving on from him. It's just he was not fine with, "You basically made me come out here for a quick meeting just to tell me you're not you're not going to be the quarterback next year." They basically said, "We wanted you to fly out here," and they said that they wanted to ask him how. Actually, no, that's what he said. They said they wanted him to fly out, and they wanted to ask, like, how they wanted this to be released, and he said he didn't care about that. It was more about, hey, what's the future of the team looking like? Do you guys want me? Do you not want me? If this relationship could become a thing, how would it work? But it didn't last very long. Now, I'll come to the defense of Rodgers in this respect. If that was the case, if their mind was made up, right, and they knew they weren't going to move forward with him as the quarterback next year, prior to him flying out from California to meet with them, then just tell him over the phone, tell him over Zoom. Why are you wasting everybody's time? That's not a good look. But what I will say is, on the surface, again, we have to see what happens on the field. But Aaron Glenn doesn't want to deal with that distraction. So I side with him on that. You want to start over. You don't want to have that kind of personality on this team when you're trying to get your footing in as the head coach. So that I understand with, but you could have had this conversation again over the phone, on a Zoom call. It was kind of a waste of time to have Aaron Rodgers fly out there if you were just going to say, "No, we're not moving forward with you." And didn't really pick his brain. You got one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time sitting there, and you're like, "Yeah, we don't need you. We're good." Now, look, Rodgers did not play great last year. I mean, he was played better towards the end of the year when he was healthier. So I have no problem with them moving off of Rodgers, but if Rodgers comes back next year and he has a great year and the Jets, win like 3 games, it's really going to look bad on Aaron Glenn. It is. Because you kind of disrespected him. Now, some people watching this are going to say, good. They're happy that he got disrespected. He didn't play well. He was a distraction. He let people lose their jobs. His level of play costed people their jobs. Okay. But that doesn't dismiss the fact that he's a first ballot Hall of Famer and he's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and you did not want to talk to him. So that was interesting. So yeah, just to clear that up, Rodgers was talking more so he doesn't care about how the releasing news would come out. That's what he was talking about. But when talking about, when Aaron Glenn would address the room, and if Rodgers was on the team, he said, Rodgers said, "You don't know me. Like, how do you know I'm going to do that? How do you know I'm going to make faces?" Is what he was saying. Look, I don't know. Rodgers could have been exaggerating it. The Jets are going to maybe say something. I know Sports Talk Radio, by me says, don't say anything. Let this, just sit there. Don't respond to it. There are things that I agree with Aaron Glenn, and there are things that I agree with when it comes to Rodgers' side. Again, if that's how fast the meeting was, you should have just held it over the phone. You should have had a Zoom call or something. But Aaron Glenn wants people to look at him as the leader. They don't want people to look at Rodgers and say, that's who we're going to follow. You're just an accessory. At least that's how I look at it. But let me know what you guys think about the Rodgers stuff. Let me know in the comments. So no decision yet. No decision yet. But there'll be one at some point. Everything's on the table. So we're going to take our first break, and then when we come back, we will talk about the playing games for tonight. I'll give you my predictions for those. So make sure to stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.